everyone, may peace be on you all, and welcome to another episode of I'm a Muslim and That's Okay. And this is another one of my Gift to the Gap segment. And I have a very special guest with me that I met, and y'all saw it on my Instagram. I was at the podcast movement convention in Dallas because that's how I roll. I'm not going to fly out anywhere. That's how I am. But I was very fortunate to meet my guest, RJ Zimmerman. How are you, RJ, a fellow podcaster?
I'm doing well, all things considered.
You just came back. You're recovering, RJ.
Right. And the convention was incredible on multiple fronts. Like, it was great meeting people like you. Like, you were the very first person that I met there, besides my friend Miriam.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that was... It was awesome to meet you, like how I did. And then the next couple days was actually like learning a little bit, but then a little bit of self-discovery about me and like my journey and stuff that we can get into. I'm so energized still. You know, it's been almost a whole week and I'm still energized from it.
It was a great learning experience. I can like vouch for that for sure. But here's the thing, you talk about, your journey of self-discovery, and we're going to get into that because RJ, as I mentioned before, he is a fellow podcaster and he has a very specific podcast called The Untapped Keg. It is about your journey of sobriety because you've been 8 years sober from alcohol and drugs, and it's your journey of being sober and what comes with it. And I know I've been following you on Instagram, and your discovery during the convention about yourself. You were documenting some more self-discovery during your time at the podcast movement. So if you could, take us back to the point. And you had mentioned this to me. We had our conversation, very first conversation. We're sitting there and, they're having the intros and everything. And we had our conversation. And you had mentioned that you didn't realize that you had a drinking problem before. At what point did that realization come to you?
So for myself, it was... I had a few people talk to me, friends in college, who were like, hey, you are drinking a lot, but like you're drinking a lot. And we're a little bit worried about you. And what it was every single time I drank, I blacked out.
Oh, wow.
And so I would drink until I couldn't walk, until I couldn't talk. And then I'd come to and drink some more until the next morning.
Oh, wow.
And waking up and my first thought always being, okay, who do I have to apologize to this morning? Going through my phone, looking at texts. It's like, this is not a way to live. Like, I don't feel like most people are living this way.
Right.
And then I got into a relationship. And I was like, I want to take this relationship to the next level. I want to start a family.
Right.
I don't have a career right now. Like, my life has no direction. And I went out with some friends back in my hometown. So I grew up in Wisconsin. For people who don't know, Wisconsin is massive drinking culture. So I went back to my hometown, got absolutely wasted. I ended up missing plans that I had with my girlfriend. And I texted and I said, hey, just so you know, I'm not going to make it. She said, yeah, I figured. So I wasn't really planning on you being there anyway. And I was like, oh. Huh.
That's gonna sting.
That was my first 2-day hangover where I could not keep anything down, water, food, nothing till 2 a.m. the next day.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, I can't do this anymore. I want to start a family.
Right.
I want a career.
Right.
I want my life to have direction.
Right.
And so that was the last time that I drank.
That's incredible. But here's the thing. as someone who's never had a drop to drink, I'm speaking for myself culturally. I've never had a
Yep.
drop to drink. And it's one of those things that when we spoke, and I was like, I do want to somehow, you know, bring awareness to the fact that this is not that this is not just that this is an issue, but that the recovery from this is difficult. But for you, it came with not one kind of healing, but two separate kinds of healing. So when you started becoming sober, I think, and that's the gift of what my gift of the gab about is today, not just your sobriety, but the fact that it led you to your mental healing as well, mental wellness as well, which is something which even now you can say 2022 is still taboo for a lot of men. So please walk us through this. So you have that, I guess, aha moment that this is not taking me where I need to be. How did you then begin? Because from my understanding of it, it's not easy at all.
No, and I didn't know 12-step programs, so I didn't do AA. I didn't do anything. I did it on my own. Luckily, I'm stubborn, and I'm more stubborn than alcohol is. But it honestly, it took me 4.5 years before I really started to heal.
Right.
Before I started to look into why did I drink the way that I drank, and
Mm,
I've been doing the podcast for about 2.5 years.
mhm.
And the podcast has really sped up that
Right.
journey. Hearing other people talk, talking to professionals, and then taking a look back at my life and just talking things out loud that I
Right.
wouldn't normally talk about out loud. So the career I went into was high voltage line tech. So I work on high voltage electricity.
Oh,
So
wow. That's
yeah,
a dangerous thing while you're drinking, RJ.
yeah. So well, I didn't start it till after I got sober, so that's a good thing. But
Yeah.
yes, I would be lying if I didn't say I didn't work with some people who were a little inebriated
Wow.
out on the job. So uh, that still happens. But going into that profession, you
Mhm.
know, the blue collar, the masculine men kind of a thing,
Right.
you don't talk about honestly much about life. Like if
Mm,
things are getting you down, if you're struggling, you just grunt and bear. And that's how I was raised. You know, you grit your teeth and you just power through it. And you don't feel, except for
mhm.
how I was raised.
Right.
Even joy had to be tempered. So if it was anger,
Could
anger's
I
okay.
ask? Could I
Yep.
ask? Was that just for men when you were growing up, or men and women, or was like for joy? I'm speaking of joy.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
So go ahead. You
yeah,
finish your
no,
question.
go ahead.
So I was gonna say, it is, I would say, on both sides
Okay.
of men and women. Like girls, their emotions are also tempered as well,
Oh, wow.
but they're allowed more of a range, right?
Right, 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 right.
And when you see a boy crying, it comes with anger. Why are you crying? You can't
Oh,
cry.
yeah.
Like,
Uh,
what are you
that
doing?
that was the thing, that it was
Yeah.
immediately shut down. The thing is, I think I was surprised when you talked of joy,
Mhm.
because if I had to like picture it in my head, I know that even culturally, for anywhere in the world, it's one of those things that if your boy is crying, you're not strong enough, and
Mhm.
a whole number of insults that are hurled at poor young boys just because they're crying, which is a normal thing to feel grief. But when you said happiness, I was like, oh, wow, that's a tough one to have to temper.
And I think it, you know, looking back, I didn't realize it
Mhm.
until I started to look into my emotions and why I'm kind of pretty straight. Like,
Mm,
I don't have much for a peak and I don't have much for a valley.
mm,
And that's not so much the case anymore. But what it was, you know, if I showed too much happiness, well, you're hurting other people's feelings. You can't do that. What about the
Oh,
people who aren't
wow.
experiencing that, right? You need
Mhm.
to hold it in. And then um it that just it it kind of makes you that one note, and then it's just
Right.
straight anger, and that's it. And so I had um anger management problems all through high school, and
Mm.
I worked on it in college. And what I ended up doing is I would shut down. Just
Oh,
I'm
wow.
not going to explode. I'm just gonna nope, cutting this situation off, kind of get out of it. A few hours later, be a little bit angry, but I felt so much about like I'm going to take that energy and I'm going to use it, and I'm going to use
Mm.
it for something different. And even like crying, I always say, I never cried. So I cried my last baseball game in high school when we lost. I cried,
Mhm.
and um, my family comes up to hug me, and I'm just bawling. And my dad is like, "What are you crying about? This is nothing to cry about. You need to toughen up." And it's
Oh,
like,
wow.
okay. And my dad is, from probably sixth grade. It was straight handshakes, like no
Oh my
hugs. No
gosh.
We're
Oh,
just gonna. And at first, I was like, "Oh, I'm being an adult. Like
right,
this is
right.
great." But his youngest brother passed away my freshman year in college,
Mm.
and that changed him
Right,
um, from an emotional perspective, where how he is now is not how he was when I was growing up.
right.
And it just sometimes I think that when I look back at it, it's different from how other people look back on it because they can remember, they know how he is now.
Right, right.
Um, but like seeing the person that he was, like I thought that to provide for my family, to be emotionally just steady, a rock no matter what,
Mhm.
that's what a man needed to be. That's how
Right,
you provide for your family. That's how you're a good father. That's how you're a good partner, spouse.
right.
Um, so that's what I did. And
Mm.
that's what I did when I went sober too. I didn't look into my emotions and look into what I was doing, but my youngest son was born, who's 3 now. And I'm struggling at work, struggling at home,
Mhm.
struggling with everything. I don't have anybody I can talk to at a deep level.
Right,
I don't have anybody in my family I can have those kinds of conversations with, um, because it's going to be, oh, you're being dramatic. Oh,
right, right.
we can't talk. But uh, so I go in, and I end up missing a couple of doctor's appointments, and I can't remember how to do basic things at work that I've been doing for a very long time.
That's
And
interesting.
and at this point, I'm foreman, so I'm leading a crew
Right.
of these masculine men that we're talking about. And so I end up going in and I get diagnosed with ADHD.
Ah, I see.
And at this point, like I didn't look into ADHD. ADHD is just, you're hyper, sometimes you can't focus, all of this
Right,
these things. When you do focus, you get tunnel vision, that kind of a
right.
thing, which now we know is hyper focusing.
Hyper focusing,
And
yes.
it I ended up getting some medications, and that
Mhm.
helped a little bit. And then I'm gonna start to look at why did I drink the way that I drank. And at that point, I actually started therapy because my wife came to me right around that time and told me she wanted to get a divorce,
Mm.
and rocked my world because I'm a really good dad. I take care of the kids. Every single moment I'm home, 100% of my attention is on the kids.
Right,
I'm providing for the family. We have a house. We have
right.
no needs, no wants. I helped her start a business that's
Mhm.
thriving. I help out whenever I can. What do you mean you want a divorce?
Right.
And her answer is, you're not emotionally available. I can't have conversations with you. And this made me start thinking, like, what does that even look like?
And that's where I mean, if I could like put a pause right there.
Hmm.
Um, that's the thing. I mean, when you said that I provide for my family, I take care of my kids, and I help my wife, you're sort of checking all the boxes in your head. And a lot of people would look at you and you're like, your wife is so lucky. She has everything she could ever need. You know, that's the narrative that is like fed to a lot of guys. Oh, you put like food on the table and you have a nice house, and you know, you're a great dad. You play with your kids. What could she want? So when she, and again, this is not a placing blame sort of situation, but
Hmm.
when your wife came to you and said, you're not emotionally available to me, um because for most, especially men, it would be like, what do you mean? Why is that necessary? How did you process that?
Well, a little bit, a little bit more about me. Like, so she's a marriage and family therapist, so I
Hmm.
know where she's coming from. I know that's important to her. Um, when I was in college, I studied psychology for 4 years. Um, and I blame myself for pretty much everything. I did before that. So she brings this up, and I sit there, and I mean, I'm shocked. I'm not saying anything. And like
Right,
I said, I shut down when I get mad at this
right,
point.
right,
Like,
right,
I
right,
feel too much emotion. My emotions are too big.
right.
Um, and so I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm not. And I said, we had just had our youngest. Our youngest is
Oh,
not
wow.
even 4 or 5 months.
Right.
I said, give me a year. I said, if there's no change in a year and you still want this, I won't stand in your way.
Hmm.
And that was the point where I went to therapy,
Hmm.
because I knew I had hangups. I knew I had things that when they happened, I shut down
Right.
and couldn't come back from.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of the very beginning of when I started to look at why I drank the way I drank and
Mm.
what I do with my emotions.
Right. And here's the thing, you are now going to therapy. And at this point, has it been that year? And what's what have you so far discovered when going to therapy about your emotions and why you respond the way you do?
Well, a lot of what I learned, I actually didn't learn in therapy.
Oh, I see.
I learned about them most in reading books,
Hmm.
listening to, TED Talk type of things, but also like when I started to really learn from the podcast, I learned a lot.
From
And
your own podcast, from doing your
yes,
own
yep,
podcast. Yeah.
like talking with people who are smarter than me, like
Right.
that, it's amazing to be able to learn from people and different
Right. Right.
perspectives. Like that's what life is about. Learn from
Right.
different perspectives.
Right.
And when I started therapy, like I went in and I said, I have the emotional intelligence of a 8-year-old, because
But
that was
how
about the
did you
point.
know that? Like, here's the thing. At this point, okay, whenever I'm on the internet, I'm continuously disappointed with I guess, the emotional integrity of a lot of men that exist on the internet. So
Yeah.
they're operating at a very low emotional level.
Yep.
How were you able to really ascertain this, that I don't have the emotional maturity that I need?
Um, I couldn't name my emotions. If I was feeling something, I
Oh,
couldn't
wow.
name them beyond happy, mad, glad, sad. That's it.
Ah, I
And
see.
anger. So when you can't name your emotions, how do you know what
Hmm.
you're feeling?
Right, right.
And so, I started talking about how I didn't cry for years. I
Right.
felt like it was a waste of energy to cry.
Hmm.
I now know that it takes infinitely more energy to not cry
Right.
than it does to cry. It's
Right.
crying resets your
Mhm.
body,
Right.
resets your emotions. And I didn't understand that because men don't cry. So why would I cry? That's like I could take that
Right.
energy and use it elsewhere.
Right. But again, now, as you've said, you found out a lot of these things on your own while doing your podcast, through your guests. I mean, through conversations, perspectives, a lot of these things. Um, but like, how would you have other men like come to this realize, oh, or first of all, let's get to this. What good has this discovery done for you, RJ? Okay. You're crying over here, feeling
Right.
all sorts of these emotions. So what good is this?
Right. Um, I can be happy and laugh, like full belly laugh.
That's
I want
fantastic.
to start there. Like, so I'm working on myself, right, for a few
Right.
years, and it's coming somewhat slow. I had a realization. First, it was that my kids would tell me that I'm being mean to them.
Oh.
This was about a year ago, maybe a little bit
Mhm.
less. And I would get mad. I'm like, you don't know what mean is. Like, I
Right.
can show you mean.
Yeah.
And then their mom turns and looks at me and goes, why are you getting mad at a 3-year-old for saying you're mean? Like,
Right.
is it because you're jealous of the childhood you're giving him? And I'm took a step back.
That's gotta sting, but I get that. Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I am.
Right.
Because I'm allowing them to feel emotions. Like,
Right.
it
Right.
wasn't the stuff.
Right.
I didn't really grow up wanting. Like, I was a very simple child. You let me go outside
Right.
and play, I'm happy.
Right.
You get me a Ninja Turtle figure every 6 months, I'm good to go. Like, that's all I
Right.
need. My imagination ran wild. So, but the emotional neglect that I got was
Mm,
what stuck.
right.
And I didn't even realize that till that moment. That
Right.
sparked something that I need to look back on. And then from there, it was um, I'm looking at them, and I'm at a low point at this
Right.
point. And I'm like, how could these kids love someone who is such a piece of crap? I'm
Mm,
such a piece of, how could they love me? So I'm looking at them and I'm wondering this. And I realize, who thinks like that? Like,
mm,
I really do hate myself because
right.
when I look in the mirror, what do I see? And I don't remember looking in the mirror and ever being like, you know what, you're doing good. You're
Right.
a good dad, like any of this.
Mm,
No, I looked in the mirror, I'm like, you need to do better. You are not good. You're a bad person.
I think that's a very primal driving force in a lot of men, that you're not doing enough,
Yeah.
or that you're not good enough. And again, this comes from a lot of like historical conditioning, that
Yep.
you got to push harder, you got to be tougher, and any number of
Absolutely.
things. So, and that's one of those things that, like, a lot of men don't cut each other a break, and themselves inadvertently.
Yep. Yep.
Has
And
that changed, RJ?
it has.
I hope
And I'm
so.
not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Like, I've gotten to the point where I look in the mirror and I say, "You're all right. You're all right.
Yeah.
Keep working." And like that's way better than where I was.
Right.
So I went to, I've had 3 or 4 therapists,
Hmm.
and um that's something that I learned through the podcast too.
Right.
You can shop around for therapists.
Oh
You don't
yeah.
have to go to the same one. You don't have to pick one and be like, "I'm stuck with this person."
Right. Right.
So, my newest therapist I really like because he's also sober.
Mm.
I can have conversations and he'll dig deeper.
Right. Right. Right.
And that's helped a lot. And that's what I need. I need a hand to get deeper into things. So
if I have to
going
ask you
from
two
there,
questions, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
go ahead.
I have to ask you two questions. Throughout this journey, okay, we have to take into consideration that you are also on a journey of sobriety. It's not just that, yeah, you gave up drinking and everything's fine. Okay, it didn't even occur to me that when we were at the podcast movement event, lots of parties at night, like a whole lot of drinking. And, you know, how does somebody who's going through sobriety handle that when it's there? You're at this event and everybody's drinking, but you're not. And especially you're in a new town, it can cause, it causes me anxiety. I don't know about you. I have like a lot of social anxiety. I was like, if I was a drinker, I'd be like chugging stuff down.
Yeah, and you know, that is like, it is difficult. Like it is, and everybody has their own way to go about it. So I have been very exposed to it being in Wisconsin. So after about, I don't know, 6 months or so, I started to ease myself back into like going to a bar at night, and but always with a friend. Started with somebody I could trust. And if I started to miss it, if I started getting a craving, if I started anything, I don't even say bye to anybody. I just ghost. I'm leaving. And it's similar. Like if I get to that point, I'll walk around, do something moving wise, because if you're moving, you're not thinking about a lot of other stuff other than moving and where you're going.
But I think my thing is that you're also on this journey of emotional healing.
Yeah.
And that's not linear for anybody out there. Healing is not linear. And sometimes a lot of really bad stuff comes up. And the temptation, like I come from a long line of emotional eaters. Trust me, there's been a lot of like ice cream consumed in all the wrong times. But you know, those are the times when it's very tempting to be like, I need this. I'm not in a good spot. What do you do then?
I eat. And I'm being serious. So like, you know, I have if I get very stressed out, I tend to have a Mountain Dew, a Little Debbie, and the Little Debbie, you know, it's like a Hostess treat.
Oh yeah.
You know, if people don't know what that is. So like, I have my treats that I go to when I'm really stressed out. And going through this emotional journey, I've been working like really harder than I have honestly my entire life on myself. And not from a physical standpoint, but from, you know, a really soul level. Not just the mental level, but like my entire soul. And that is what kind of culminated at podcast movement, where that first day nobody initiated a conversation with me. Nobody. And you know, you and I, and this is, I get the first official day, right? Because we were at like pre-day where we met, but you're the only person that I talked to at the event. And like, otherwise it was Miriam, and like, that was it. And I'm like, why is nobody talking to me? So I thought it might've been the mask. So the second day I wore my Ninja Turtle mask. And I'm like, okay, you know, who's not going to come up and talk? And I tried to dress like, I didn't dress like super fancy, but I didn't go like all the way casual. I'm like trying to make it so I'm approachable. And I did go to the party the first night. I actually went to the party every single night. And I go there and nobody talks to me. And I'm like, and I'm sitting alone and I'm just drinking. But at this point, I was drinking a Coke. So that's what I was drinking.
It doesn't matter. Not judging here.
I'm walking around. I'm starting to feel like, you know what? Why is nobody talking to me? Like, and I already felt bad because nobody came up and talked to me at the conference. And then I'm sitting at a seat, and I'm like, you know, I've worked really hard to be okay with myself. I can sit here and watch these people interact and kind of laugh at some of the guys that are super creepy and like make sure that there's nobody in a dangerous like
Right,
situation.
right.
Um, so I'm just sitting there and being okay with myself, and then I leave, and I'm like, you know what? This is a new RJ. I was
Yeah.
kind of feeling bad because that was the old RJ, where I would need that outside validation. I would
Right.
need people to come and talk to me and experience a little bit more. That doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt, but
Oh,
it
yeah.
does mean that I can be alone and be okay with it.
Could I ask, like,
Yep.
before when you drank, did you find yourself to be more outgoing or more, I guess, fun? I don't know. That's a very subjective thing, but
I
you know,
was the life of the party when I drank.
right,
So people would always ask where I was.
right,
They'd
right.
always ask my friends. My friends would text, "Hey, everybody's asking about you. When are you going to get here?" And then I'd get here and they'd be like, "Oh, it was boring. Thank God you're here." Um,
Ah,
and there were times where it was very unhealthy. Like
hmm,
I was almost a clown, like
right,
kind of
right.
thing. Like, oh, we need RJs so we can have somebody to laugh at and feel better about ourselves.
Oh,
That
wow.
kind of a thing, right? And I didn't
Right,
realize it
right,
until years after, where I'm like, the way they actually like their tone and everything,
right,
they definitely were not my friends.
right,
And
right.
um but this time like I'm walking home from this party and I'm like, why would I expect things that the old RJ got if I am not that RJ?
That's right.
And that started me to kind of look at some of the aspects of my life. Like I started asking myself, have I been going through life as a supporting character in my own story?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one.
And I,
That's
I
such a
have.
tough one.
I have. I've always put my needs on the back burner, no matter what,
Ah, I see. Yeah,
except for
yeah.
when I was drinking.
Right,
And all
right.
I needed then was alcohol.
Mm. And do you feel, and again, this is the aspect that for a lot of men, that even with when you see how society's constructed, men are
Mm.
in positions of power, leadership, all of those things, that they don't see themselves they only see themselves as supporting role. Or, I mean, how do you feel that your dad saw himself and maybe you inherited some of that?
Um, I think yes. Like I don't know if my dad saw himself as a supporting character in his own story,
Hmm.
but I do think that he had um bouts where he was put on the back burner. His needs were put on the back burner. He would always put his
Ah,
needs
I
on the
see.
back burner. And so he was going to teach me to do the same.
Mm,
Um, but I also think that the do anything for family,
hmm.
and no matter how you treat your family, like they owe you because they're family, right?
Right, right,
I think that that's something that I don't vibe with. That's something that I
right,
don't
right.
subscribe to.
Because again,
And
it's a very dangerous dynamic sort of thing.
yes, yes, absolutely. And I think that when a lot of people interact, especially men,
Hmm.
a lot of context is removed from actions. It
How,
is
how
when you're
so? Now this
so when
is
you're
interesting again
talking,
because I'm
yeah.
not not like a dude. So I mean,
Right.
for us, communication is different, and I know for
Mhm.
men it's different as well. So what do you mean that context is removed?
So I noticed it at work.
Hmm.
That was where I noticed it first. And people would talk about how people did a job. Why would you do that? That's so dumb. Like, how dumb are you? You don't know how to do this? Like, do you like doing things wrong? And it's like, well, it was 2 o'clock in the morning,
Right,
uh, 20 degrees below zero.
right,
They were 40 minutes away from the office and they had to get these people back in power. I think they just did whatever they could,
right, right.
but that context was never afforded. Like the way that people talked about it was normal working hours on a bluebird day, which would be blue skies,
Right,
clear
right,
day.
right.
That was how they attributed it to everything. And I started thinking about it, and I'm like, everybody's actions when we talk about it, or feelings,
Right, right,
we don't allow context to come into it.
right.
It's
And
like everything's in a vacuum.
and I think that is one of those things that may be a majority men thing, because for women, again, we're so used to like looking at so many facets of everything, because
Mhm.
we're socially conditioned to take care of, family matters, kid matters, extended relatives, whatever you want to call it. And for us, context comes automatically, but I don't think that that's the same way for men.
And a lot of what we do in society too as men is other men are competition, whether it
Mm,
be for women, whether it be tribalism, whatever it is,
right,
jobs. Um, and then also like a lot of it is like women are a prize, right?
right,
So that's where we don't have camaraderie with one another.
right.
And then also, you know, let's be honest, like men are predatory. So women have to keep their guard up around us.
Ew.
So
Scary mace
especially if
all
they
the
don't know
time.
us, right? So like knowing this,
Mhm.
knowing what's going on inside my mind too, sometimes I wonder if people can see the storm that's going on inside my head. And like if
Mm,
my face has this intense look on it because I'm
right.
battling myself inside.
Ah,
Uh, but when it comes to talking to men about
right.
feelings, you have to add context.
But how easy is it to talk to men about feelings? I think that would be my next question. Like, again, I come from a certain very specific generation where
Mhm.
I have never seen that happen at all, no
Yep.
matter where or when or which relation it is. Men did not say that I feel sad about this, I am hurt by this, and I don't know what to do. So, like, how can men talk to each other about these things that are integral for them to discuss, but they're not taught how to do this?
And that's where it really starts is learning
Mm,
and wanting to learn. And not just learning about emotions, but learning about your friend, like at a real level, learning about other people. And when you start to, it's hard. It's hard with your
Now,
friends.
if I could interrupt,
Yeah.
and again, I hate doing this, but here's the thing, RJ, what's the point? Really? I see specific, very specific, I'm not going to name names, podcasters that are out there saying that those men who show emotions are simps and all manner of things that are derogatory. I am the alpha male, and alpha males don't show emotions, and it's all bad. There's a lot of men out there who are listening to all this tripe, and they're like, what's the point of discovering emotions? What's the validity of any of these emotions when all I want is money and gals? So, what's the validity of any of this?
I mean, the validity is, do you want to be your best?
Mm,
Because your best is with emotions.
that's
Your
very
best
powerful.
is not being a shell.
Right.
And that I had to learn the hard way.
Mm,
It is not fun being 36, well, almost 36, 35, and learning how to feel your emotions.
right.
Feeling like a teenager again because this is the first time that I've allowed this to happen.
Right.
I've kind of alluded to it, but like I'm going through a separation right now.
Mm,
2 little kids. It is hard.
right.
And even though it's not a quote unquote messy divorce, that doesn't
Mm,
make it easy. Like
right.
neither of us set out to, not be together.
Right.
And we're still partners in raising our kids. So that doesn't mean that there's not emotions, but uh, through your emotions, not over, not around, not pushing them down.
Right.
Through those bad emotions, on the other side is just as high of a good emotion. It
I
is
think
that
that's
joy.
fantastic.
It
Right.
is that happiness. And you
Right.
can't find it by trying to go around or over. You have to go through.
Right.
And it takes a lot more grit and a lot more energy. It takes less energy, but it does take a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? It is harder. It is harder to let
So
your
would you say that it's tougher to have emotions than not to have emotions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you don't even, when you're not feeling your emotions, you're always on eggshells.
Mm.
You're always wondering, why you can't get comfortable.
Right.
What's the next thing that's going to happen that you're going to have to push away? Because it's going to be something.
Right.
And that's life. There is going to be something.
Right. So if there's anybody out there listening, doesn't have to be a man, but like, since coming from your experience, there are problems that like just suppressing can't fix. Going to therapy helped you. And if there is someone who's a guy who's out there, he's listening to any of this and he's like, I don't understand the need for this. And I know you've mentioned that, having those real deep feelings is worth so much more. But then in the wider context, if you had to put it, why should men be going to therapy? Like, what's the biggest thing that could come out of this if, like, in a population of 300 million, even half of the men of that population went to therapy? What would be the advantage of it?
There'd be a lot less violence. If you want to be honest from a man's perspective,
Right.
from a absolute like manly man,
Right.
the sex is a lot better. Like being
Hey!
when you're connecting at a different level and you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to feel what is happening. Like it is head and shoulders better. You'll be able to go on vacation and actually enjoy it instead of wondering how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to, I don't know if I like this. Like, this isn't what I want to do. Also, less people take advantage of you.
Right. How so?
Because when you're feeling your emotions, you're going to let people know, like, hey, it's not okay to talk to me like that. Hey, I understand that you are stressed out. Okay. I completely and totally understand that, but you don't get to talk to me that way. You don't get to talk to people that way.
Right.
And you don't get to treat others that way.
Right.
I used to always just let people walk all over me because like, what's the point of necessarily fighting back till you get to the point where you're going to be throwing fists?
Right. I mean, have you ever had to have that situation where like you're setting boundaries and somebody's ready to throw fists? That'd be scary.
Actually, and it was pretty close at podcast move.
Wow.
Oh,
Really?
there was a men's group there.
Right.
In the expo. And my friend told me I should stop and talk to them. I didn't know that I was being set up. And so we're talking and we're having a pretty good conversation. And I have a pin that says he, him on my badge. And the leader of the group comes up. He's the mentor. And, he's like, hey, I really want you to meet this person. He's been sober and talks about mental health. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. And he sees the pin. He's like, let me ask you about this right here. And he flips my pin. And I'm like, okay,
Ooh.
what? And he's like, so I ended up staying there for over an hour having a conversation about safe spaces at a toddler level, having a conversation about pronouns at a toddler level, and trying to give context to people who remove context from everything. And when you think about men, and especially white men,
Mm,
who remove context from everything because we don't have the context for a lot of social interactions.
right.
You have to explain that context into it, right? So when you talk about safe spaces,
Mm.
you have to talk about, you ever been around that boss that you ask that question and they're just on you and they make you feel like crap, and
Yeah.
you just stop going to them and stop asking questions.
Right.
And then there's that coworker you can go talk to
Right.
because they're not gonna act like you're the biggest dummy in the world if you ask them a question and you
Right.
feel comfortable.
Right.
Said that's a safe space versus an unsafe space. So you have to give the context. You have to walk them, pick them their hand. And I honestly figured this out with my toddler and trying to
Mm.
explain concepts to him that there's nothing
He's
to relate it
3.
to. Yeah. So how do you do? And I'm like, wait a second. I've had a conversation like this. And then I'm
But
talking
you're
to
a
the
better man than I
yeah.
am, RJ. Trust me.
And it's
I'm
like,
5 foot
oh.
nothing. You've seen me. I would have thrown hands right
Yeah. And it was like he kept saying, like, I mean no offense and like everything, but he was like getting very aggressive
Right.
talking to me about this. But I never budged. And like he wanted to
That's
take
amazing.
my values and toss them down the drain. I kept sticking to my guns, like, no, you're not gonna say this. No.
That
And
is
then at the end,
amazing, RJ. And
at
and
the end,
that's
he
the
shook
thing.
my hand and wanted to be on my podcast.
And that's the thing, that this is it. If anybody, whoever is watching this on YouTube, you want to know the advantage of finding and really processing emotions, you are it. Okay, to be able to go through that and still hold your peace in a situation like that, that is absolutely amazing. That is the culmination, the real epitome of strength, because it's not easy to do. And it takes work. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, you're not walking around like a Neanderthal whose sole purpose is to start fights.
And I mean, how much fun is talking about the weather or the local news every single day?
Right.
Let's have some
Right.
fun conversations.
Ah.
Like, instead of this, like, that's the thing. That's
Did you
what
see
we
the
don't know.
traffic on I-95? It's like,
Yeah.
please, do I care?
How about that drive in? I
Yeah, I
can't
know.
believe it. And this doesn't mean that I don't lose my temper now, right?
Yeah.
I still do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm more patient with my kids. That doesn't mean that I hold it perfect every time. Like, I'm human.
Right.
But we can have conversations like this. We can have conversations. I've had conversations with friends and I've gotten to know them better than I've known them my entire life. And these are friends that I've had since kindergarten.
Wow.
And it's hard
Right.
broach it to be like, no, I'm not talking about like at a surface level. I mean,
Right.
seriously, how are you doing?
Right.
And
right.
you don't always feel, and I think that this is also like where we get in trouble sometimes as men too, like when you're in a relationship with someone and you think it's okay to open up, so you open up and then it's kind of thrown back at you either right away or later on down the road. But like, that happens with friends too. But
Right.
sometimes it's not about fixing, it's about just listening.
Right.
And when you listen, there's a lot more understanding.
Right. And I think that's one of those things that and a lot of women need. And that's what we have when we have communication with other women. It's not when we're talking, it's not that we need something fixed. It's more like I'm having a really bad day and somebody did something to me. I just need to have it come out, sort of situation. It's not a matter of something needing to be fixed, but when people are heard, it makes them feel that they matter. And I think that comes with this sort of emotional healing, that you are able to hear what people are really saying, and it makes the other person feel important.
Absolutely. And, sometimes we need to be validated. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. That person was in the wrong. Like,
Right.
you deserve to be angry about that.
Or
But
you're
what can we
given
do
an
next
honest
time?
opinion. Okay. If you're
Yeah.
being the jerk, somebody has to tell you, being the jerk, you
Yeah.
need to stop.
And be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Like, that has helped me so much. Sometimes to a fault. Like, I've taken the blame for things, and looking back, I've realized I took the blame for that, and that was not me.
Right.
And yeah, that does, beat things down. But if you just keep pushing your emotions away, you'll never work on it. You'll never get past it. That situation happens again, you're going to go back to how you were when you first experienced it.
Right. And now, I would love it if you could tell everybody where they can listen to you, to your podcast, Untapped Keg, and where they can find you on social media. And also you had mentioned that you now have a group of men who are also on the same journey of mental wellness and emotional discovery. Please tell us about that as well.
Yeah. So you can find the podcast at Untapped Keg on all podcast platforms. If you go to untappedkeg.com, there's a nice page there where you can find all the episodes and click the button. It'll take you to the podcast player that you want. And then Untapped Keg on all social media platforms, one word. So nobody took Untapped Keg for anywhere. And so we got it everywhere. I got it everywhere. And then one of my really good friends that I made while podcasting, he's one of my best friends. His name's Big Kev from Laugh for a Purpose. And him and I started a men's group because we had talked about how, we were raised and how we both, like, he didn't struggle with substances.
Right.
He struggled with suicidal ideation and depression.
Wow.
Our journeys very much parallel paths. And we decided that we were going to have a group of men. And it started as, we call it a burn meeting. You write down the thing that is blocking you in life the most, talk about it, and you burn it. And then we move on past it. And just about every single person, I want to say we had 12 people at the first meeting over Zoom. I think there was only one person who didn't. Everybody wrote themselves, like self-loathing, self-confidence, things along those lines.
Right.
So we realized, like, we need to have more of these. So we have it once a month. We put out on social media the Zoom meeting, and we just get together.
And this is on Untapped Keg.
So we don't air it. It's not recorded. So that way people feel comfortable talking.
But the Zoom link is on Untapped Keg? Or
So if you DM me, I'll send it to you. So that way we can kind of weed out the trolls. But you DM me, my DMs are open everywhere. If you need help with, let's say, substance, if you just need to talk, I can help find you resources in your area. I will do that. I will help you I'll listen to you, and I'll talk to you at a human level. And then I also post daily videos, not really daily, but sometimes, of my journey, what I'm going through, some revelations, some things that are hard, being a parent, being sober, some advice like through sobriety, but really it's just me being vulnerable with you and showing it's okay. Like, I posted a video of me crying because I was watching some TikToks, and I'm like, people need to see a grown man cry. And so I took a video of me crying, and this is how it is. And, it's easy when people are shouting about how great they are and how emotions don't matter. But what you don't realize is how they feel about themselves is coming out through anger. They're just being emotional in a way that you find acceptable.
Right.
And when you start to think about things like that, in that when you preach fear, like whatever energy you put out in the world, world. And if you put fear out into the world, you're going to be met with fear.
Right. Right.
And if you don't want to be met with fear, you need to start putting something different out there.
Right. Thank you so much, RJ. I think what you do through your podcast and through this, I mean, if I could call it a support group for men, bringing them together to help them find healing and emotional growth, I think it's so fantastic. I will definitely put up your links on the screen, and so anybody who wants to listen to your podcast, whether they're on their sobriety journey or on their mental health journey, I think it's such a valuable resource. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you to everybody who's listened in and watched us on YouTube. Thank you all for listening and watching. Y'all take care of yourself, and may peace be on you all.